With the village on the brink of collapse, the king made a desperate decision. He gathered the bravest warriors and the wisest elders, seeking a way to confront the River Queen and end her reign of terror. He knew there was no simple solution, no spell or weapon strong enough to defeat her hunger. The king faced a painful choice: sacrifice something precious to break the curse, or risk losing everything. His heart ached at the thought, but he understood the weight of his duty. The lives of his people rested on the outcome of this dangerous gamble, and time was running out. A group of brave warriors, each chosen for their strength and courage, stood ready to face the River Queen. They had trained their whole lives for battles against wild beasts and enemies, but this was something unlike anything they had ever encountered. The River Queen was no mere monster. She was a force of nature, a spirit tied to the land and waters. Yet, these warriors, driven by love for their families and a burning desire to protect the village, volunteered to face the unknown. Their hearts were full of fear, but their resolve was stronger, knowing the fate of the village rested on their shoulders. The entire village gathered, their faces filled with a mix of fear and determination. The elders whispered ancient prayers, while the warriors sharpened their weapons and prepared for the journey into the heart of the jungle. The mothers held their children close, praying for their safety, while the fathers steeled themselves for the battle ahead. It wasn't just the king's decision anymore. It was the will of the people. Together, they would face the River Queen. The villagers knew that this battle could cost them everything, but they were willing to fight for the future of their children and the survival of their home. The village's plan to save the children was bold and dangerous. The elders revealed an ancient ritual, one that could potentially weaken the River Queen's power, but it came with great risk. The ritual required the blood of a willing sacrifice, a child chosen by the queen, and a special incantation that had to be spoken at the river's deepest point, where the queen's spirit was strongest. The villagers knew that if they failed, the river would claim them all. With heavy hearts, they selected the bravest among them to carry out the plan, knowing the path ahead was fraught with peril. As the villagers ventured deeper into the jungle, the air grew thick with an unnatural stillness. The shadows seemed to shift, as though they were alive, watching their every move. The jungle that had once been their home now felt like an alien world, full of hidden dangers. The trees whispered, their branches creaking like old bones, and the underbrush rustled with movements that couldn't be explained. The villagers pressed on, hearts pounding with fear, knowing the spirits of the jungle were both watching them and testing them. Every step felt like a step closer to the queen, and to their doom. As the villagers reached the river's edge, a heavy silence fell over them. The once roaring waters now flowed eerily calm, as if the river itself was holding its breath. The water shimmered with an unnatural glow, reflecting the moon in a haunting way. It was as though the river was warning them to turn back, to leave its domain before it claimed them all. Yet the villagers stood firm, unwilling to retreat. The river's silence was more terrifying than any roar, for it signaled that the River Queen was watching, waiting for them to make their next move. As the villagers stepped closer to the river's depths, the atmosphere grew heavier, charged with an undeniable force. Suddenly, the water began to churn, as though something beneath the surface was stirring. A low, rumbling growl echoed from the river, followed by a piercing wail. The queen's spirit had awakened, furious and hungry. The ground shook, and the air turned icy cold, filled with her wrath. The villagers could feel her presence, a force of pure malice that sought to crush them. Her spirit lashed out from the river, a terrifying reminder that she was not easily defeated. The king, driven by a fierce determination, stood at the forefront of the villagers as they prepared to confront the River Queen. This mission was not only to save his people but to redeem his own soul, for he knew that his bloodline had been touched by the curse. With each step toward the river, he carried the weight of the village's hope and the lives of his children. His heart burned with a resolve that could not be shaken. This sacred mission, though filled with peril, was the village's last chance to break the queen's hold over them. As the villagers ventured deeper into the queen's domain, the true nature of the river's darkness became clear. The water, once clear and beautiful, was now thick and murky, swirling with a malevolent force. Beneath the surface, twisted shapes and ghostly figures drifted, the souls of the children who had been taken. The river's surface reflected nothing but darkness, as if it had become a mirror of the queen's cursed soul. The villagers could feel the weight of the water pulling at them, as if the river itself was alive, a dark, sentient force that thirsted for more. The journey into the jungle grew more treacherous with each passing moment. The dense foliage tangled around their legs, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Strange, unseen creatures watched from the shadows, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The path ahead was unclear, as if the jungle itself sought to lead them astray. The villagers pressed on, their resolve hardening despite the dangers. They knew they had no choice. Only by reaching the heart of the river could they hope to confront the queen. But with every step, the jungle seemed to grow darker, more alive with menace. As the villagers ventured deeper into the jungle, they began to feel an unusual presence, an unseen force guiding them. The jungle spirits, once guardians of the land, now stirred in response to their mission. Faint whispers filled the air, their voices gentle but clear. The spirits had sensed their courage and offered subtle guidance. Glowing trails of light flickered in the trees, and faint melodies carried on the wind. Though the path was still perilous, the spirits' guidance gave the villagers hope. They knew that with each step, they were drawing closer to breaking the River Queen's curse, despite the dangers ahead. After days of navigating through the jungle, the villagers finally reached the heart of the river. There, hidden among the tangled roots and vines, stood the queen's lair, a place where the very air seemed heavy with malevolent power. The ground was damp, and the water flowed sluggishly, thick with an unnatural dark hue. The lair pulsed with a sinister energy, as if the River Queen herself was waiting, watching. It was a place of pure evil, where the queen's spirit resided, and the villagers knew that confronting her here would be their greatest test yet. Only one path lay ahead. In the depths of the queen's lair, a child stood, Nia, the last to be spared. Unbeknownst to her, she was the key to ending the River Queen's reign of terror. The ancient spirits had chosen her, for she was pure of heart and untouched by the curse. Her innocent blood was the only thing that could break the river's hold. As Nia stood at the water's edge, the villagers realized that she had to make a terrible choice: to offer herself as the sacrifice that would shatter the queen's power, or risk losing everything to her insatiable hunger. The villagers had learned that the River Queen's curse was not just a spell, it was an ancient, unbreakable bond, forged by dark magic long before their time. Her thirst for blood was a punishment, a twisted result of her greed for eternal life. The more children she consumed, the stronger her curse became, until it could never be lifted without a great sacrifice. The queen's power was entwined with the river itself, a cycle that could never be broken unless a life was willingly given, one pure enough to counter her evil. The villagers now understood the terrible price they would have to pay. As the villagers stepped deeper into the lair, they were met by the restless spirits that guarded the queen's domain. These ancient beings, once protectors of the jungle, were now twisted by the river's curse, bent on keeping intruders away. They howled and screeched, their forms shifting like smoke. The villagers, armed with only their courage and the guidance of the jungle spirits, fought back. The battle was fierce, with the spirits clawing and screeching, determined to prevent them from reaching the queen. But the villagers pressed on, knowing the future of the village depended on overcoming these dark forces. As the villagers advanced further into the queen's lair, the river roared with a furious rage. The once calm waters now churned violently, crashing against the banks with an unnatural force. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, vibrating with the queen's anger. The sound of the river's fury echoed like a warning, each ripple carrying her wrath. The villagers, hearts pounding in fear, knew they had crossed a point of no return. The river had become a beast, alive and hostile, doing everything in its power to drive them away, but they would not turn back. The final battle had begun. The River Queen's heart was as twisted as the river itself, cold, unyielding, and consumed by hunger. Once a beautiful woman, her desire for power and immortality had corrupted her soul, binding her to the waters forever. Her heart pulsed with an insatiable thirst for the life force of children, and each drop of blood she drank twisted her deeper into darkness. As the villagers approached, they could feel the weight of her malice radiating from the very water that surrounded them. The queen's heart was her power, and destroying it would be the only way to break the curse that bound her. In the depths of the river's lair, the River Queen had claimed her final victim, the king's own child. Nia, the last innocent soul, was now at the mercy of the queen. The villagers had hoped to save her, but the queen's hunger was relentless, and she had already marked Nia as the final sacrifice needed to secure her rule over the land forever. As the child stood on the riverbank, her innocent eyes wide with fear, the villagers realized that the queen's grip had tightened, and the last hope to break her curse was slipping away into the dark waters. Seeing his child in the grasp of the River Queen, the king's heart burned with fury. All the years of watching his people suffer, the fear and pain of losing his child, erupted in a tidal wave of rage. With a roar that shook the very ground, he charged forward, his sword raised high. The river itself seemed to tremble in response, the waters darkening with the queen's wrath. The king's eyes burned with determination. This was the moment to end her reign. Every ounce of his love for his people and his child fueled his every step toward the queen, ready for the final battle. The villagers, filled with a shared resolve, stood united behind their king. Fear had been replaced by courage, as each person knew what was at stake. The mothers, fathers, warriors, and elders all stepped forward, their eyes locked on the River Queen. Together, they prepared for the final battle to free their land from the curse that had haunted them for so long. The jungle whispered its support, and the spirits of the land, no longer bound by the queen's control, joined in. Every step forward was a step toward reclaiming their lives, their children, and their future from the river's grip.